Úpal is the second full-length album from Minneapolis, Minnesota-based avant-garde or abstract black metal band Kostnatění. Kostnatění. However you would pronounce that. That is a Czech word, and the interesting thing about this band is that they were uh, sort of birthed from an era of intentionally obscurant and non-commercial black metal experiments in the early 2010s. And this artist, being an outsider himself, has really taken it upon himself to create something that is more personal with each release. The original releases were more of a, well, this is the point where I started, and this is what I'm going to do with this band or this project. And it was based on the Rhinoceros and Odsmanuk style, which was, amorphous enough to begin with. He actually did a fantastic way of expressing what that movement and style was all about within his first demo. It was, if you followed Fallen Empire records when they were around, it was a pretty cool kind of late release in their, 2018 was a kind of a good time for that label and kind of their cresting on their peak. So um, this project was interesting, but it was a little bit too late in that wave. So anyway, it was an appreciable demo. A lot of people remembered the band from it. I was never all that impressed until I was um, a big fan of Serpent Column and their uh, Mirror in Darkness full length featured this fellow on vocals, and that caused me to take a closer look at the effect and the feeling of his second major release, first full length, Hruza Zvite Z, and well, it was a different thing, and it's not what this record is. It was a completely a dissonant black metal record. Well, the important thing is that the voicing of the guitars were becoming notable. It's a thing that you'll get a little bit of foreshadowing of what Upal is about if you go back and listen to that record. So if you'll do any sort of diligence to the artist in understanding the breadth of their discography and their development over it, the place to start is with that first record and to understand the skill of the guitarist developing a voice and a very scrambled, skronking sort of mixture between anything from noise rock to arabesque music and purely dissonant phrase. Now, that's not what this is necessarily, and we'll get to that after the clip, which will make it a little bit more clear why this is different. So through that first album, there appeared to be a process of self-actualization happening with this eccentric fellow who certainly learned a lot from that record, expressed a lot in that record, and a lot of that was anxiety. And when it came time to be done with that, and this second cycle happened, uh, the focus was more on developing skill and voice in music that was not related to heavy metal. I don't think the root of his interest in music is heavy metal. I think it's in the minutiae of extreme metal and the emergent explosive feeling of it as a point of passion. And you can kind of see that in the way that he constructs songs, which are impressionistic, abstract, and kind of like black thrashing in a lot of ways. And I say that because there are several songs on here that do have that feeling of almost I say shamisen or bouzouki or these stringed instruments that use certain scales in fast repetition to impress in a virtuosic setting. And this music is not so much virtuosic as it is expressive in the same way as that would be, but also as like Absu's Terra was. And I think that's for me, that was kind of the root of why this sound was interesting, as the fellow eventually produced some Turkish like basically abstract black metal covers of Turkish folk songs on an EP back in 2020. Uh, and my response to that was, "This is cool. If he can write his own songs with this in mind, that would be something entirely new." And it is, and that is this album. That's it in a nutshell, basically, is not that these are Turkish inspired melodies or Turkish melodies in serious, but they're definitely influenced by a lot of different modes and styles in Arab and Oriental music. And so what that means is that to brace all of that, there'll have to be a compromise in the rhythms. And that's kind of, there's a lot that went into this music. I'm not going to get into the theory of it. But the rhythms aren't necessarily that complicated. And that's kind of where the comparison to Absu starts and ends, is that the rhythms have to adjust to the strange meter of the guitar work and its intent in expressing something which is flashy, emergent, a bit of a freak out, and also often quite consonant in its actual read, because it will be based on a folk melody. So there's this interesting mix of really technical black metal and thrashing affect and folkish melodies that they don't interrupt one another. They flow together beautifully, and that's kind of the nice, readable, accessible thing about this record, is that all those things flow together with sense, and it makes for like a brilliant record that is sort of outside of time, outside of place. It's the perfect sort of outlier touch to give to a black metal record, which is not necessarily fully black metal. Even it's there's some parts that are related to death metal. There's all of it is related to his taste and his interest, and in a way that will remind people a lot of what Serpent Column does. Is it's a pure abstraction of a recognizable form and hyperrealization. So I found that it was kind of awesome. It's one of the most interesting records of the year so far. I think that the artist has this really enlightened perspective that isn't too pretentious, but certainly is looking beyond the usual stuff that this music will get slotted next to. And I think it stands out quite well in that regard. Avant-garde music can be strange to talk about in a sense of populism and, you know, how that's readable in terms of what is familiar, but ultimately the experience is unlike anything else that you'll likely hear all year. At the same time, it won't be so unlike anything else that it won't be enjoyable. It will be challenging to most listeners, but I think I was about 5 listens in, and it just really felt like a uh, more of a thing that was built on with the readability of the melodies and the expression of the music in mind, and less just like a daunting skronk fest. There are noise rock style songs on here, and there are um, quite technical guitar runs all over the place, but they are fairly randomly strewn. They are impressionistic, and it becomes a language that you'll understand without needing to follow every note into the abyss. So anyway, it's a high recommendation on my part. It is one of the more interesting black metal adjacent records of the year, and I would definitely recommend giving this one a serious shot, because it's sort of a one-off thing. I don't think he's going to explore this style and sound any longer from the sound of things, and I think this will be something that people really appreciate, even if in hindsight. So check it out if you're so inclined. Read the review if you're so inclined, and that'll be out next week.